Hello, everybody, and welcome to another riveting edition of Coffee and Code Platoon. I'm your host, Greg Drobny, the student recruiter for Code Platoon. Joined with me, as always, is Kayla, doing the heavy lifting and all the things that matter most. Hey, welcome, everybody. So, just a heads up, Coffee and Code Platoon is kind of a casual offering to the general public to answer question or ask and have answered questions about what we do here at Code Platoon. And this is a very casual format. We don't really have any structure other than to answer questions that are posed. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you're coming upon this recording later, my email is greg@codeplatoon.org. That's GREG at codeplatoon.org. Feel free to email me anytime. And that's what I do here at Code Platoon. So we're going to start off with some basic questions that we already had sent to us. And then if you're here, you joining us, you can ask in the chat or come off mic and ask directly, however you want. So we're going to start off with a basic question that we got sent in. And that question is, can I go to Code Platoon if I don't have any coding experience? The answer is yes. Bottom line answer is yes, absolutely. We have had numerous students come to us who had zero experience. And by the time they walked out of Code Platoon, they were employed as a software engineer. Now, that being said, it's important to note that by the time you actually start a cohort, you will have some foundational knowledge because we have free classes that lead up to the cohort. The application process is inherently intertwined with learning the fundamentals you will need to be successful in this path. So we're not starting day one at a cohort at zero. By the time you get to day one, you will already know a little bit about Python, JavaScript, things like this. So can you come to us, to me, and start this process knowing absolutely nothing? Yes. But in the process of getting into a cohort, you will learn some basics and be well on your way. That enables us to maximize the time in the actual cohort so that we can spend that, we can hit the ground running when you hit day one of the cohort.
Thank you, Greg. Another question in a similar vein that we've had sent in before, and this can be kind of a personal answer depending on the individual, but how do I know if I'm ready for a coding boot camp?
That is a great question. And that's one of the areas I think where Code Platoon excels, actually, is because part of this application process is a means for you testing yourself to figure out whether or not this is the right path for you. We have a tremendous amount of resources available to the general public completely free of charge. I shouldn't say general public, for the military community, free of charge that enable you to get going on this path and figure out whether or not this is right for you. So something like our intro to coding or our guided application process, you can go into all of this with zero monetary commitment, no commitment other than just engaging in the process, engaging in the learning. If we think about this like a language school, everything that leads up is kind of teaching you the basics of how to communicate in the most fundamental way. So if you were to go learn Spanish, we're teaching you how to say, hello, how are you? My name is. And those are kind of the fundamentals that you're going to learn even before you get there, even before you get to the beginning of the cohort. That enables you to answer that really important question. Is this right for me? Am I ready for this? Is this something I really want to do? And this is one of the rare professions where you can actually do that, by the way, because if you sit down and you go through an intro to coding program and you absolutely hate it or you absolutely love it, that's a clear indication of what the career will be like for you, because that is what the career is. Unlike other fields, there's a lot of professions out there where you don't know what it is until you've already gone through 4 years of schooling and you get into the business world or whatever it is. Or healthcare is a famous example. You can go through 4 years of schooling in healthcare, get in front of a patient and realize, I have no idea what this is all about. This is not what I signed up for. Coding, software engineering is cool because you can learn from the beginning what it is that you're going to be doing. Of course, it's going to be at a higher level, but you're engaging in that process from day one with the free material. So we have a lot of resources to help answer that question.
Absolutely. I really like how you put it, Greg, that coding is something that you can really start out on. And while obviously you're like improving your skills, like it's not that different from how you start to where you get with it. It reminds me of a lot of alumni of Code Platoon I've talked to have been like, oh yeah, I'm doing like the same thing I did during my final project, just at my job now.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
absolutely is. And I think that's really important to convey to people at the beginning part of this process, because I know far too many people who got into a field, a certain profession, and it turned out to not at all be what they thought it was based on the training, based on a college degree in that field or something like that. Um, Again, healthcare is a famous example of nurses go through 4 years of schooling to become a nurse, and they get beside a patient and it's like, oh my gosh, like nothing in school prepared me for this. So that's an example. But if you get into coding, you sit down and start doing it and you really love it, that's a great sign.
Absolutely. In that vein, I feel like we've been getting more questions recently about so our programs are full stack software engineering and DevOps and cloud engineering, but what other jobs can alumni of the program get after they graduate? Say they go through the program and they decide maybe I don't want to be a full stack software engineer, maybe I want to go into software project management or something in that vein. What are the possibilities there for a Code Platoon graduate?
Absolutely. Great question. And I think we should collect some actual data on this, but just going based on anecdotal evidence, obviously the most common job title our graduates obtain is that of junior software engineer or junior software developer. That's the most common, but is certainly not the only one, with others being like data scientist. That's another one. Quality assurance, quality testing of software. These are all fields that our graduates have gone into. We even have graduates working in the cybersecurity field now. As I've said often, I think software engineering is a better foundation for going into cybersecurity rather than the other way around. And I've had numerous people in the industry tell me exactly that. It's not that it's perfect. It's not a one-to-one analogy, but if you can go from software engineering into a lot of different fields, where it's a little bit harder to go from those fields into software engineering. So it's a fantastic foundational educational path, and that it is teaching you the fundamentals of these languages that undergird everything in software. Python and JavaScript are everywhere. And so if you know how to read, write, manipulate these coding languages, it's kind of like learning English and Spanish in America today. You can do a lot of things with that. It does not pigeonhole you into teaching English or Spanish. You can go into a lot of different areas, having a very solid base of knowledge in those two languages. Similar here. So I think data scientists and then quality testing and quality, like software quality testing, are the two most common, other than, and you might correct me on that, Kayla. Maybe you have some actual stats on that.
I know we will have some stats on that very soon because we're gathering data for our 2024 outcomes report. So if you're watching this as a recording, check our website page and you can find more information there pretty soon.
Yes, I'm sure that we will have a blog written about exactly that coming up soon.
I'm working on it right before this, in fact.
I
So
figured you were. I figured.
awesome. Pivoting a little, let's go with a really walk me through, Greg. How do you apply to Code Platoon? If all of this sounds really good to somebody who is either here now or watching the recording, how do they get started?
Great question. And it's actually a two-part answer, because we now have two different ways of applying to Code Platoon, which is great. So if anybody goes to our Apply Now page or our calendar page, I think it's listed on both, we have options of guided application or unguided application. Now, what that means is that if you choose the unguided application, basically the way this works is that you're going to do part one. Part one is the same either way. Part one of our application, which starts on the page, any page on our website, you can see the Apply Now button. Click on that. That's going to take you just a few minutes to fill out a basic information gathering form. And from there, you can choose, do I want a guided application or unguided? We'll start with unguided. Unguided
One
is,
second before
yeah,
you
go ahead.
continue. The unguided application on our website is called the standard application, just to
Oh,
clarify the vocabulary there.
I'm glad you corrected me on that, because Yeah, these are new things for those of you joining us. We've just kind of revamped this. So even us, we're relearning some vocabulary here. So the standard application is us giving you resources to do the application on your own, which means us sending you intro to coding, either an intro to JavaScript program or an intro to Python program, which we have numerous videos for to help you do what you need to do to learn the basics in order to fill out the second part of the application, which involves some coding challenges and other parts of the application that will require some basics of coding that you can do completely on your own. You can use our resources, all of which is free, by the way. This is not charged. And just basically start learning this as much as you can on your own. And that does include outside resources as well. And I add this because I get this question a lot. Are people allowed to use other resources? Absolutely. JavaScript and Python are not proprietary of Code Platoon, obviously. So yes, you can use other resources. If you already have some knowledge in one of those languages, by all means, knock it out. Option number two, however, is the new thing. It used to be we called it Quick Pass, and we recently renamed this the guided application. The guided application is a class that you will have that is an instructor-led participatory class where you're learning those same fundamentals. The difference is that it's an instructor there to answer your questions and help guide you through that application process. Now, if you notice on our calendar, we will have a deadline for the application, the standard application. The guided application comes after that deadline. This is a common question I get, so I'm addressing this now. Yes, you can still attend the guided application and do that for that same cohort, even though it's after the deadline. That's what it's for. And it's to help you address the coding challenges, but by way of an instructor helping you do so, and a class of others doing the same thing. So you're going to get a lot of question and answers going through this whole process. Again, standard and then guided, and this is my own personal advice to everyone out there, if we are this far out from a deadline, so for example, our Zulu deadline, which is, what's the exact date on the Zulu
November
deadline?
24th.
November 24th. We are over a month away from that deadline. My recommendation to everyone out there right now is to do both. So sign up for the guided application, yes. But in the meantime, because you have 5, 6 weeks between now and that guided application start date, start learning as much material as you can on your own. Start diving into the intro to coding. Start diving into JavaScript, Python, whichever you choose. Start diving into that. And that way, once that guided application starts, you won't be completely lost. But number two, you're not wasting that time in between here and then. So take advantage of what we have to offer for sure. And those are kind of the two basic paths of the application. I don't know if there are follow-up questions to that, but please feel free to ask if there are.
Absolutely. I know we've been talking for a while, so does anyone here have any questions?
And again, feel free to come off mic or come off mute and ask, or type it in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable doing. You can ask.
Otherwise, I know this is a follow-up. We get a lot about the application, but when is the right time to start preparing if you're thinking of using VA benefits?
Good question. So it depends on which VA benefit. So we have two possibilities for VA benefits to use at Code Platoon. Number one is a GI Bill. And GI Bill comes with a heavy caveat, which is that you have to attend in person. If you cannot attend in person, then the GI Bill is not an option. This is the VA's rules. This is not Code Platoon's rules. This is how the VA looks at schools like ours. That's why they came up with Vet Tech a while back, but Vet Tech doesn't exist right now. It might in a year from now, we don't know. But as of right now, there is no Vet Tech. So GI Bill, but that's pretty straightforward. How we get people registered for a GI Bill. You can go through the application process as per the deadlines, and it won't have a huge impact on the GI Bill. Earlier is obviously more helpful, but we're still going to register you with the VA, and they're going to pay the tuition and also give you the living stipend if you're attending in person. Now, option two is a little trickier. Option two is VR&E, formerly known as Voc Rehab. VR&E is Veterans Readiness and Employment Program. If you're attending via VR&E, I encourage people to start this process as early as possible, because one of the lengthiest pieces of the VR&E process, the hardest piece of the process, is getting a counselor assigned to you and getting them to agree to this program. So if you go on the VA, if you have a VA rated disability and you qualify for VR&E, if you go on the VA's page right now and apply for it, it doesn't take you long to apply. But what does take a bit of time is waiting for a counselor. That can take a month or 5 weeks, even, maybe even longer. I've heard it as low as 3 weeks, as long as 5 to 6 weeks. So that's a big gap between requesting benefits and actually getting a counselor assigned to you. At that point, you will have a meeting with that counselor and they will determine whether or not you're eligible. It doesn't work like the GI Bill. You have to have a counselor sign off on saying yes or no. The advantages to VR&E, however, are huge, because it will allow you to attend remotely or in person. It will give you a living stipend. It will pay for a laptop. It will pay the tuition. It's a great program. It's a fantastic way to go through Code Platoon. But just be aware that it does take some time. One big caveat to this, and this is something I just recently learned, it is possible, apparently, to get VR&E applied retroactively. So if you go through the program and you didn't quite have all of that worked out before you started, a counselor doesn't have to, but can sign off on paying for Code Platoon after you've already gone through or after you've already started. My personal piece of advice is don't bank on that, because they don't have to. This isn't the GI Bill. This is not a mandated benefit like the GI Bill. It is at the discretion of the counselor. So don't bank on them being able to do that. I'm just saying that it is theoretically possible.
Thank you so much, Greg. I did share in the chat, and we'll probably share in the description of this video as well, the link to learn more about using VA benefits or scholarships at Code Platoon. So in that vein, let's talk a little bit about scholarship options for folks who can't use VA benefits. What do applicants or students have to do to get a scholarship?
Very little. Bottom line, we make scholarship applications very simple. In fact, we have a scholarship eligibility form that we can fill out now on our page that will let you know whether or not you're eligible for a scholarship. But here's the kind of the bottom line at Code Platoon is that every person who fits into a demographic who can attend Code Platoon fits into a category that is eligible for a scholarship. And what I mean by that is that obviously Code Platoon only serves the military and veteran populace, the military and veteran community. So if you are a military member getting ready to get out under SkillBridge, if you're a veteran, or if you're a spouse of someone in the military, or spouse of a veteran, or a child of a military individual or a veteran, you are eligible to come to Code Platoon. And if you fit into one of those demographics, we have scholarships for you. We make the applications for these incredibly simple. And our scholarships typically run between 80 and 100% of the tuition covered. So yes, it really is as good as it sounds. I know when I first heard it coming to Code Platoon, when I came to work here, I thought there's no way it's that simple. It is that simple, actually. It really is. And Code Platoon really does put its money where its mouth is in that regard. So we make the scholarship portion of Code Platoon very simple. It's not like university scholarships at all. You're not going to write essays and hope for the best. We let you know very quickly, and they're very generous. Again, we know bottom line at Code Platoon is that we don't let tuition be a barrier to attendance. We do everything we can to make sure that it is affordable, and that if you don't come to Code Platoon, it's not because of the tuition. That's kind of one of our bottom line goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I was the same way when I started at Code Platoon, like a couple of years after you. I heard about the scholarships and I was like, it's kind of crazy that there's that many options out there and it's so easy. I
Right.
remember when I went to college and it was so hard to get a scholarship, but it
You have
really
to
is
piece
that
them all
easy.
together and write essays for this and this, write a 10,000 word essay, and you might get $500 here. And it's like, what? No. And then Code Platoon has a form you fill out and get 80 to 100% coverage. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm working on the outcomes report right now. So I do have stats, and I can tell you definitively that I believe 90% of our students in the last year received a scholarship, which is awesome. And of those scholarships, I don't remember the percentage that was full, but it was a lot. It was most of them. So
It's very high. And it's
yeah.
worth noting too that if you only qualify for an 80% only, I mean, that's huge. But an
Hmm.
80% scholarship, it's not like we're making that money due right up front before you even attend. Like I've seen them work with people on that number too. So it's not even like that's a hard and fast, you have to pay this before you can even start day one or something like that.
Absolutely. So in the vein of applications, since we do still have a while before the next deadline, I do feel like people tend to ask as they're preparing and they're like, oh, I have a whole month left. Maybe I don't need to start quite yet. How much time would you say the application takes? I know now there's two different applications, but maybe first standard and then guided.
That is a great question because it's so variable by person.
Hmm.
I'll still, even though we now have the guided application and the standard, for the standard, I'll give the same answer that I've given for years now, which is that it depends a lot on your particular situation. For example, I have talked to students in the past who had nothing going on in their life. They were a single person with no kids and they didn't have a job and they were able to knock out all of the work needed for the application in a matter of a week to week and a half, like a week to 10 days, and they were done. But that's because they had nothing going on. Right. But then I've talked to people who have spouses, children, full-time jobs. That's a whole other matter, right? The amount of time you can dedicate per day is going to greatly impact how far out you need to plan. In relation to that, I would say if you have a lot going on in your life and you have to, you can only set aside maybe an hour a day, then I would plan for at least a month out to be able to go through this standard application process, at least a month. And again, this is somewhat dependent too on your own ability to pick this up and how quickly you pick it up. Now, all that being said, the guided application is fairly straightforward, right? We have it goes on for 3 weeks. Is it three
Hmm.
classes per week for 3 weeks? Uh,
Yes, previously it was Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings, I believe 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central Time. Future guided application classes may vary a little bit off of that, but you will know with plenty of heads up if you are applying in that method when those classes are going to meet.
Right, right. So that is a little bit more straightforward in the amount of time that it's going to take you. But here again, like I mentioned earlier, if you are this far out from an application deadline, start on the material now. It can't hurt to dive into that as much as possible. And I like to think about it. We do get this question a lot. We get the question of how long does it take to go through the application process? The answer, honestly, is forever. And here's why I say that, because I don't think you should look at this necessarily as hoops to jump through to get into a program that's going to teach you. Your learning path for this career starts today. It starts now. It starts as soon as you start. You are learning the skills necessary. Again, I go back to that language analogy and imagine that your goal is to be an interpreter. I want to be an interpreter at the UN. How long does the training start to be able to speak fluently in another language? The ultimate answer is forever. It takes you for, and you're going to be learning constantly from now until you are done doing that job as a profession, because you're going to be constantly learning and you're never going to exhaust what you're learning. But the short answer is, okay, we want to get you to a comfortable place where we can start this program and hit the ground running. So in that way, you're going to need at least as per the guided application, you're going to need at least a month to go through that and get everything done. What happens if I don't pass the coding exercises? At that point, when you're into the coding challenges, here's how that whole process works. You're going to be interacting with the instructor who is evaluating those coding exercises. So as you submit those coding exercises and submit them to Code Platoon, the instructor is going to come back with feedback, and he's going to tell you exactly what to do next. Maybe he's going to say, we should wait till the next cohort, or maybe he's going to say, hey, there's just a couple of things that you need to understand, and if you tweaked your answers to these exercises, you'd be good to go, and here's why. So he's going to give you feedback on how you can adjust and what you need to do at that point. So at that point, you're interacting with the instructor, and he's going to tailor the response and what you do next based on how close you were. It's kind of like, if to put it in school grading context, and this isn't a perfect analogy, by the way, but to put it in this kind of context, if you score a D plus and you only need a little bit to get to that C plus range, that's one thing. But if you scored an F minus and then we need a lot more work, well, that's a different answer. So it really does depend on not passing, what that actually looks like, because we're not doing a cookie cutter thing. It's not a cookie cutter. Well, you didn't pass the coding exercises, therefore you're out. Don't ever talk to us again. We don't do that. We don't play that way at all. And we're going to work with you as an individual and address where you currently are, not just where you should be.
Absolutely. The feedback could even be, if you submitted the standard application, hey, do the guided application classes,
Which is why I suggest
Yeah.
everybody sign up for the guided application anyway, because there's no harm in signing up for that and getting some extra training. There's no downside. It's not like it costs you anything if you don't show up.
Absolutely. I believe I said earlier what the class days and times tend to be for the guided application classes, but I don't believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. I don't believe you're obligated to show up for every single class if you are unable to make a couple of them, as they are recorded and you can watch and follow along on YouTube as needed.
That is correct. And we do not have any kind of strict attendance policy for the guided application classes. Yes, we encourage you to come to as much as possible. But if you let's say you went to the first week, maybe week and a half, and you say, you know what, I've got this, and I can knock out the coding exercises and submit a full application, I'm good to go. Cool. Awesome. Do it. We don't begrudge anyone for not showing up. Now, again, ideally, should you go to as many as you can? Yes. But we also have people who have commitments and they just can't make it until the cohort starts. Perfectly fine. That's happened more times than we can probably count, because it's hard to track attendance, as we've found out with guided application classes. We're getting better.
Absolutely.
We're getting better.
Absolutely. I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but if we haven't, the guided application classes are in fact free. So there literally is no downside to signing up and
Right.
giving them a shot.
Right. Yeah, there's no downside to signing up for the guided application. None whatsoever.
Awesome. Well, let's see. We've been going for a while. I would say, are there any other follow-up questions? Otherwise, we'll give you back some of your time.
Any follow-up, anything at all? Any other questions? Funding?
Any final thoughts, Greg?
If you're viewing this as of right now, October 15th, or in the next day or two, you are in an ideal position. And I say that because we often get people who come right at a deadline, or right as it's like getting up to the drop dead date of when you can get all of this stuff done. And that makes it harder. It does. It makes it more of a challenge. Anyone who's watching this right now or coming to us right now is in an ideal position because they have exactly enough time to prepare and get all of this in order, whether it's funding questions or the coding exercises or learning the material. We've got time. We've got time. We've got what till November 24 before you even have to sign up for guided application, which means you can spend the next month and month to 10 day, like what, 40 days learning this material as much as you can. And if you get to that point and recognize, hey, I should go through the guided application, awesome. You've still learned a lot and you're in a great position. So again, if you're watching this right now, great position to be in. There is no downside to trying. And I cannot emphasize this enough to anybody out there watching. There is no downside to trying. We do not look down on somebody for trying and not making it. We've had numerous people come through on their second effort, second attempt, and we encourage that. But again, no downside to signing up and giving it a shot. See if this is for you. It's one of the coolest areas of the modern world to test yourself for free. It costs you nothing other than your time to test yourself and figure out, is this right for me? And I unintentionally made a rhyme right there. Didn't really intend that, but here we are.
Awesome. You're a poet now. In addition.
Not a very
Um,
good
all right. Yeah, so if anyone has any follow-up questions, how can they reach you, Greg?
Too easy. Greg at codeplatoon.org. I'm going to put it in the
Yeah, I'm
chat
gonna put
one
it in
more
chat.
time,
There you
but that
go.
is GREG at codeplatoon.org. Please email me. This is what I do for Code Platoon is talk to people one-on-one. If you feel more comfortable asking me questions one-on-one, I'm happy to do that. Set up a phone call or just exchange emails, whatever works. Even if you're on the other side of the world, I just talked to someone in Indonesia the other day, so I can talk to anybody wherever. Please reach out. Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out and I'll answer whatever questions you have.
All right, definitely take advantage of Greg as a resource there. We did, as you probably know, record this so you can follow up on our YouTube channel if you need to review anything we talked about today. And we will have more Coffee and Code Platoon sessions. We'll have 2 in November and 1 in December. So there's others that you can come to between now and the deadline if you have any other questions or would prefer this kind of like rapid fire group approach to getting your questions answered, or talk to Greg. Until then, we will see you later. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.